Continuing in Matthew, we're at the part where Jesus is led in the desert for 40 days. He fasts, and then he is tempted by the devil. And I found some interesting things out about this moment in time and how they relate to Adam and Eve, and the contrast between Adam and Jesus. So the first verse says, "Then the Spirit led Jesus into the desert to be tempted by the devil." God doesn't tempt us, but the reason Jesus had to be led into the desert to be tempted was to show us how to deal with temptation, to prove to us that we can do it, and how to do it using God's word in our defense. Next it says Jesus fasted for 40 days and nights, and I was wondering why 40, and I think it has to do with Jesus in his human form. While he was here on earth, one of the reasons he was here was to show us how to be good people, and to prove to us that we can do the things that he did while he was here. So he couldn't, he had to play by the earthly standards. That's why he was born from a woman. That's why he was a babe. That's why Joseph had to protect him and run to Egypt. That's why he was raised as a boy. And so according to medicalexpress.com, after 40 days, the body actually starts to break down, and you can die from that, obviously, after 40 days. So why did Jesus fast at all? What was the actual point of fasting? And it seems like in the Bible that fasting humbles you, and it makes sense because you're hungry, you need food, and you're relying on God to get through that. Here is the definition of humble. It says having or showing a modest or low esteem of one's own importance, a low social, administrative, or political rank. So you're lowering yourself before God, putting God above you. And here are some verses that talk about humbling and fasting in the same verse. Now this is what I find really interesting, the contrast in this event between Jesus and Adam in the garden. So while I was doing research on humbling, I found this verse in Matthew 23, "For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." So here is the definition of exalt. And it says to raise to a higher rank or a position of greater power. If you remember in Genesis 3:5, in the Garden of Eden, the devil says to Eve, God knows that if you eat the fruit from the tree, you will learn about good and evil, and you will be like God. Adam was trying to exalt himself because he wanted to be like God. And in that verse it said, whoever exalts themselves will be humbled. And Adam was humbled. There was a curse placed on him, Eve, the ground, the snake. Jesus, on the other hand, humbled himself through fasting and was exalted. So let's compare Adam and Jesus. Adam was in the garden, surrounded by food. God told him not to eat just one fruit off the tree. That's it. He could have everything else. And he could not even resist that. He wanted to exalt himself to be like God. And he ate the fruit when he was tempted by the devil. Jesus, on the other hand, was in the desert or the wilderness for 40 days, super hungry, tempted by the devil after the 40 days, had humbled himself through fasting, resisted temptation, and was exalted by God, moved to a higher rank. What else I found was interesting is that Adam, a man, ate the fruit and brought death and sin into the world. Jesus humbled himself. He resisted the temptation and eventually brought life into the world and a way for everyone to find life. So I hope you learned some things today. I hope maybe that I brought some things to your attention about fasting, the significance of the 40-day period. One of the reasons for fasting, to humble yourself, the reason Jesus did it, and the contrast, which I thought was really interesting, concerning Jesus and Adam